Your Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Vice President and Prime Minister, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to contribute to the Women in Government Forum. The fact is that despite women's increased engagement in the public sector globally, gender parity is still far off in elected and appointed politicians. With less than a decade to go until 2030, there is only one SDG indicator that is nearly on track, that of women in local government. While we must celebrate this, we must also continue to push for all the indicators in the collective goals we have set out in Agenda 2030. Women make up about 1/4 of national legislators and 36% of local councillors worldwide. Only 5 countries in the world have a parliament that is at least 50% women. UAE is one of those select few countries, and here I would like to salute and congratulate our hosts for this achievement. Women hold the highest executive positions in only 25 countries. At the current rate of progress, gender parity will not be reached in national legislators before 2063 or among heads of government before 2150. This is too slow. Excellencies, your political will is essential for changing the face of public life. More women in leadership positions lead to fairer and more inclusive decision-making. This, in turn, leads to greater sustainable development. Your Excellencies, we know that existing barriers can be removed by using temporary special measures such as 50% gender quotas. In addition to quotas, more women can be appointed to executive positions to achieve gender parity in local and national governments. In echoing the call of the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, on International Women's Day a few weeks ago, I urge you to turn the clock forward in favor of women's leadership and empowerment. UN Women stands ready to support you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is indeed an honor to be here today. As one of the few male speakers at this panel, I'm honored, and it's really excellent that the World Government Summit has had the time and the focus to really look at the role of women in governance. Before I invite my colleague, Dr. Sara Chehab, to present the findings of the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Institute's Index on Women in Diplomacy, let me make 3 very brief comments and venture a prediction for the future. Firstly, any country or any profession that misses out on the full potential of women, in fact, misses out on the potential of 50% of its population. It is incredibly important that at all levels, whether professionally or in national government or in any field, we actually fully integrate women and provide them with the opportunities to develop and to participate in society and in decision making. Secondly, in my previous capacities as Defense Minister, as Foreign Minister, as Under Secretary General of the United Nations, I can vouch from experience that there is no profession that a woman cannot hold that is currently held by a man. And in many professions, in fact, in many roles, women are far better than us men at doing that. And certainly diplomacy is one of those areas where I feel that the more inclusion of women is particularly important. Thirdly, there is a glaring gap in the world of diplomacy and the role of women. And that gap is particularly in peace processes. We have seen far less women involved in peace processes globally than is necessary and that would be helpful and certainly facilitative to reaching peace deals around the world, whatever the conflict areas are. And now if we look into the future, unfortunately the sad reality we face today is that we're probably entering a prolonged period of global confrontation and division reminiscent of the Cold War of the past. As we enter that period, diplomacy will become far more important to countries, particularly to middle countries, than it currently is. As diplomacy becomes more important, the inclusion of women in diplomatic discussions and diplomatic decision-making, in peace processes and negotiations in the future is far more important than it has been in the past if we're going to avoid the mistakes of the past in the world that we will be shaping for our children and for generations to come. Therefore, it is greatly inspiring for us at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy to really focus annually on what is the status quo of women's participation in diplomacy and what can be done to, in fact, increase that role in the future. And with these opening words, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Sara to talk about the findings of our report this year. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Your Excellency, for your remarks. Thank you, Your Excellency, for the kind invitation. We are here today to propose or to discuss a status check on women in various fields. We've heard this morning about how many women are part of legislative bodies. We're going to hear later about women in cabinets. We're going to hear about women in the private sector, in tech, in science. We're here today to give you more information on the status of women in diplomacy. So if I can just, there we go. Do we have women, or do we have enough women in diplomacy? This is what our annual index at the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy seeks to answer. We've been publishing a report since 2018, which we call the Women in Diplomacy Index. It's an annual report that measures the percentage of women ambassadors around the world. This is a report that started first by looking at the countries of the G20, and then in 2021 and also in 2022 was expanded to include the 40 largest economies of the world and the European Union. The data set is large. We have measured so far more than 4,200 ambassadorial appointments across the 40 largest countries economically of the world and the European Union. And we want to track how many of those ambassadors are actually women. This is the only index in the Middle East and North Africa region that is aiming to do that. So this is a product that we're very proud of. It's a public document. It's available on the Anwar Gargash Diplomatic Academy website in both English and Arabic, and we invite everybody to download a copy of the report and to get more information about it. Why do we do this? We hope that by documenting the percentage of women who can reach the top of the diplomatic ladder and become ambassadors, we hope that we can measure progress through time, but also give ministries of foreign affairs around the world a way to benchmark themselves against their peers by looking at where they've been and the progress that they're making through time. So let's do this status check, since this is the title of our session. So let's see how many of worldwide ambassadors are women. I don't think it's going to come as a surprise to anybody in this room to realize that women are severely underrepresented in the top diplomatic posts. And I have to stop here and say that we're only looking at ambassadors. We're not looking at junior diplomat or mid-career diplomats, because the aim here is to gauge the extent to which women are able to reach the top posts. So we want to look at the top posts as a way to measure how easy it is for women to get promoted at their ministries of foreign affairs. So out of 4,293 ambassadors that we found in our data set for the year 2022, only 927 of them are actually women. If we want to talk about percentages, this amounts to 21.6%. So 21.6% of ambassadors across the 40 biggest economies in the world and the European Union are women. If you flip that, this means that around 80% of those ambassadors are men, which talks to, a severe gender inequality in the field of diplomacy. If we want to look at the glass half full, because I just gave you the glass half empty version, so if we want to look at the glass half full, we have been able to measure that we are making progress. we started, we started looking at the data in 2018. And as I mentioned earlier, in 2018, we looked at the countries of the G20 only, and we found that only 16% of the G20 countries' ambassadors were women. We expanded the data set to 40 countries in 2021 and the European Union, and we found out that 20.7% of those ambassadors are actually women. And in 2022, that percentage increased a little bit to 21.6%. So we are making progress. Those who, perhaps adopt a more cynical view would say that, if you account for statistical error, this is not progress, this is perhaps, stagnation of some sort. But we like to believe that we are making slow and steady progress as more countries appoint women to top posts. This map right here gives an overview of all the countries that we looked at, and all the numbers that you see highlighted in blue indicate progress since 2021. So the numbers and the percentages that you see in blue indicate the countries that have appointed more women to the top ambassadorial posts in 2022 when compared to 2021. So just by glancing at this map, you can tell that, for the most part, the majority of countries have appointed more women and have made more progress in 2022. I would like to highlight that the two countries that have been able to achieve gender parity in their top ambassadorial appointments in 2022 were Canada and Sweden. 50% of Canada and Sweden's ambassadors are women. The other three countries in the top 5 are the United Kingdom, Norway, and South Africa. And in Norway, the UK, and South Africa, women make up from anywhere between 40 to 47% of ambassadors. So it's great to see a few countries actually leading the charge, but we obviously need to do more. Because when you look at this map, you realize that in some countries you have, percentages as low as 1% and 2%, which is clearly not enough. And so we constantly need to be reminded that we need to push forward with appointing women to top posts. Moving on to where women are actually posted, and this is a very interesting question, we were able to find that Portugal is actually the #1 destination for women ambassadors, and the second most popular destination is the United Nations in New York. As you can see from this chart right here, what we found is that international organizations and European destinations seems to be the most, the places where women get appointed to the most. And within Europe, we have a group of states, the Nordic states. These are the group of countries where women actually get posted to the most out of all European countries. And then, this is not going to come as a surprise because we also found out that the Nordic states are those that send the highest number of women ambassadors abroad. So we actually found a correlation between the countries that actually appoint the highest number of women abroad are also the ones that receive the highest number of female ambassadors. So it's a clear reciprocity trend that is at work here. We pushed our data analysis a little bit further because we also wanted to see whether women ambassadors were actually being posted to what we call top ambassadorships. Now, I know, and as everybody is aware in this room, that defining what a top ambassadorship is can be quite tricky because a top ambassadorship is going to be different depending on who you ask and depending on the country that you're talking about. But just as a way to facilitate this analysis, we define top ambassadorships by using the G7 as a proxy because of the G7 states' important, political and economic clout. So we wanted to see how many female ambassadors were posted in the G7 states. And this map right here shows you that in 2022, the overall number of women ambassadors posted to G7 countries is actually quite low. But out of all these countries and the European Union, Canada and the United States have received the highest number of female ambassadors. So I'm not gonna speak more. I'm just gonna leave you with the concluding thought that, the numbers are, they don't show a very pretty picture, at least when we are looking at top ambassadorships. What we're reminded of again and again is that diplomacy is still very much a man's world. And with just 21.6% of all ambassadors being women, this shows that we're very far behind on our goal for gender equality and gender parity in the field of diplomacy. And I hope that we can use today's forum as a place to, first of all, find out why that is the case, but to also, be reminded that this is truly a call for action, and we really do need to see more women get to the top of the diplomatic ladder. Thank you very much, and I look forward to discussing the report with you around these halls. Thank you.